So to continue from where we stopped from, I think all the videos I'm going to make are going to be 30 minutes long, and let's get into it and continue from where we stopped from. So yesterday we stopped at we stopped when we were done with our UX part of it, where we added our shared CN component. We made it into a library by creating the library parts, exporting the parts of it, a script for building the dist, and then we created a simple feature for the header here, and then we have our utilities, and we implemented bits of it to our TanStack route web part of our application. So up next we're going to get into our backend. So our backend, that's what we're going to get into, and today we're going to speed up the process of development. So for our backend, we did create the Rango effect, we did run the Rango types and it generated them, and for now we have nothing yet. What we want to do is to be able to access the RPC or whatever it is called. Let's see on the guides and info. Yes, RPC. We want to be able to develop type to allow for us to use types in our application from our backend application, which is our Honor route. So what we are going to do is we're going to speed up this process, and I'm going to rename from server, I'm going to call it backend instead of server. And let's close this and install that. So clear this and then run ban div to restart our server, and it's still working. So let's get into our code, and first and foremost there are these parts we're going to set up, which is the Rango file itself. I'm going to rename it to backend. I'm going to restart that again. Let's rename everything else to backend. Previously we had the reference in our types to the backend, which for now we are going to remove it for now, because we shall add it back later on, but for now I don't see the point in us having it here. Okay, I think we shall use it later on. That's when we shall implement a library kind of sharing between the two of them. So we shall call this backend because it's here, type, and then one step back, which is these two dots, and then to backend, which is what we are getting our reference from. So close this, close that, and close that. So we have our setup with Wrangler. We have Drizzle here, and we have our package backend, which has the main serving as index, and then our setups for the Cloudflare part of it, and so on, which we shall get into, but not at this moment. We shall get into later on for those for the backend part and so on. Right now we are going to create a new file called client.tx, because we want to export our types separately from the client, and that's why we are going to add another file called types here, so that we have client and types here, and we export them from our index itself. So we copy everything inside here, add it there, and then export client, and then Now we enter into the part whereby we're going to make our we're going to start with the procedure of making our RPC approach of things. There's something I wanted to do. Which is have let's see, third party. Let's have some other middlewares. I wanted us to have open API in our application, having open API. So we are going to copy this as it is, come back here, cd into apps, and right now our backend folder is named backend, and then ban add and install that. Then so I'm going to first reference this. So we use a standard validator, which is Zod. We already have Zod in it, so I don't see why we would need this. Shall add open API. Okay, as we continue on with our implementation of RPC, let's ignore this. So RPC is basically we are going to couple all our routes, all our implementations of our routes into one single unit, so that it can be referenced as a single unit. Basically, that's how I understand it. So we have to decouple them. Rather than referencing application itself, we have to decouple them into units, into one single scaffold, which is this. So here we have our RPC implemented. Basically, this is how it's implemented, and we're going to go into types, export type, and then we shall call it application app types equals to type of client, which we're going to import our client from client itself, and this is our RPC. As you see it, so the RPC is this, though it's not a complete implementation yet, because there's the client side that we're supposed to implement, and we're going to export it as well from /types. So in our build, we're going to rename this type client. Instead of index, we're going to rename it to client, and then as well as in our rank, we're going to rename it to client. And this is going to take long. So we have to run ban install workspace server. So there is something okay. There is one of the implementations in one of our packages that references server, which is here, and we rename it to backend, then install, and it removes their project, installs the new one as fast as possible, and that's about it. Ta-da! That's done. So since we want to have it based on a type kind of format, we are going to have TSC to build as the dist part of it, but as well as in our div, let's also have TSC and watch it as well. Then run install clear, then ban div to start our turbo repo server again, which we were supposed to run the types themselves. As we remember, we renamed it to cfgen, which is here, cfgen, and generate the types themselves as fast as possible. Generated. Let's close this and restart it again. And everything is running just well. We refresh this and it's working fine. Now the other part we're going to implement is the client side of it, RPC. We have to implement this, something like this, on the client side so that we can use it, because we are done with implementing this, and we need to implement this on the client side to use our server implementation on the client side. So here we have our server, it's referencing our server very well. Let's also add vit. Let's name it public URL, which is going to be the URL for the web itself, which is 301, as you can see from here. Our web div, which is the client, our website of it, it's running at port 301, and here we're going to put in here our honor client.ts. This is where we're going to put it here, and we're just going to copy this as it is, carry it, add it here, and we need to import it from HC from honor. That's where we're going to import it from. I'd hoped it was going to auto install. Let's go to ban. Let's head into ban and get it from and reference through the docs. Auto install. Let's go here. See. I doubt it's there. Okay, there is the ban terminal, and and under install. Okay, we have auto install, and let's add it here and hope it does work, which I'm actually doubting as well. Let's do the same here. That works. Just copy this for the sake of copying it and putting it there. No, doesn't work, but well, At least we tried. So let's try import our app type app type from backend. Which is supposed to be a type. And we can't import it because we don't have a model to export it. So what we're going to do is use reference itself from the back end. App types. So it was app types. Let's see again if that will work, but nah, didn't work. I'll figure that out later on. So front end cd / web ban add Hono into our project, the client side project or the front end. Okay, adding that. See, oh, it's supposed to be /client. Okay, that worked. And then we're going to import .meta .env our environment, which is server .server, and here we want to add fetch I want us to include let's call this Hono client, because I want us to include authentication, so that in case we are making a request to a path that needs authentication, we actually include that. Which has this. Yes, this is what I was looking for. It was supposed to be in it. Okay. Which is credential, just like how you would add it when you're using fetch, and you put your URL and then come here down and then use credential and use include itself. So it's going to be the same thing, but for this we're using init for it. So if you're making requests that require authentication, it will easily just integrate that rather than us passing it into that. So it will easily integrate our cookies into it. So let's test the implementation here, which we're going to use here data, and let's use query, use some okay. Wait a minute before we do that. There's certain things missing here that we need to implement. Number one, we're going to add in our query client for query client.ts. Okay, I'm going to reference from one of my projects because I like the way I set that up, and I don't think I really need to rewrite all that again. something to do with, okay, it's not that. Okay, wrong file. It should be in this one. Yeah, we have the query client here, which we shall use TanStack query for, and then implement our toast as well for that, our first toast to handle our errors and so on. And here we create the new query. I'm going to copy this as it is. Okay, let's couple it down to a more reasonable approach, and we are going to, just a minute. No, I think let's start from ground up and use a better example to use this. So as we go back to our TanStack beta T-stack, we're going to go here and copy all this as it is. RPC, SQL, Drizzle, D1, Rango, and skip installation, skip the Git part. Basically, I want us to have a scaffold project for us to get the query from the TanStack query from it, so that we can have a base project to use on, like, copy the idea from there, and that's what we're going to do. To borrow ideas from there, because I mean we want our project to be as best as it can, so it doesn't hurt taking ideas from other parts. So here we go, and all we need is inside here under library. Okay, I think I'm wrong twice. Let's see. Okay, yes, this is what we need, the query client, and copy it, paste it there. And so far this is what we're going to use. We shall improve on it later on. So this is what we have. Oh, RPC side of things. Not the same implementation. The one is ORPC. So what was I thinking of? Oh yeah. So we're going to add our query client here. Yep, let's add it as it is. And then we shall also add our Auth client here, which is going to be Auth client, which is this. Here we have our Auth client. We have called our query, and then we're going to have our ONO client as our context, so that we can use it under context if necessary. Did I export this? No, I don't think I did export it. So export. Yep. And there we go. This two will most likely be type of, though query will be a query, but this is supposed to be type of, and this we're supposed to also reference type of instead. I'll refresh our code again. I don't know why it's bringing up that error. Then install. Okay, I think I understand a bit on what's going on. When we're calling reference, it basically calls the entirety of it, and with that it calls Rango, whereby Rango is not implemented inside this side. So what we have to do is call this, unless we are going to later on turn this into a library, and to act as a library for the most part. Because right now it's not building it as a library, it's not really doing that. So for now we are stuck with that, and let's see. Okay, have that done. Then we need to implement it here as well. Our query. So here we go into our reference application, our reference project that we built, which has this. Okay, copy this as it is and just bring it there. So our query provider is this one, unwrapped it. Okay, I think let's use the clauses rather than the brackets themselves. Okay, and there we go, we have that done. Now something we need to call them here. We have auth as we created the context here. We need to actually reference them in our project so that they are actually implemented on a global level. Query client from / library query client. Okay. Just a minute of reference. Just make a reference from this. Oh, okay. Yeah, I made my mistake was trying to reference it again as as calling it from the package that the construct that we just built, instead of just calling it as query client itself from here, because it's still the same thing. And then here we go with our auth client, which we need to add type of, and then call it from lib. Same thing. I do like to arrange my projects with the highest downwards or the highest up, like based on the lines. The longest implementation goes down or up depending on the arrangement, but that's all just a preferential thing. It doesn't really matter that much here. So these are not going to be types, and the other are going to be types, and to them we have our implementation ready. Refresh that, and now can head into HANA, head back here, because use query, and here we are going to implement our first query. Is have the query key, it's use query, not use queries, and we are going to just call it RPC, and then implement our query function, which is going to be, let's make it as an asynchronous statement, and const response as an await from, we can use route, sorry, we shall deal with that later on. Let's use the HANA API. Index dot let's create a route that we can call. So we have get, and we don't have API part of it. Okay, let me leave that as that, and let's see. Because we want to call this sorry, close everything else because it's bothering me. We want to call one of our API routes here, like this, and return it here. So we don't have API, we have index, which is the one we are looking for, and it's a get call that we're looking for. And now we're going to have a result as await response dot JSON. We return it as a JSON, and let's use that result here, and then let's implement data. Let's call it request, and we can implement it here just to return the value. Sorry, it's supposed to be span, and then close that. return the value, and we can remove this just to keep our code tidy. So since our request is not JSON and it is a text instead, we use text actually, which we receive our text here. So our backend is working correctly, and we can change that to hello world, and it should work just fine. And there it is, it's working just fine. We shall implement the auto refresh part of it and so on. So we have our ORPC working just fine now. What we are going to do next is get to implementing our authentication is the next part of it. So this is our auth route, which is this API authentication, and that's going to be our auth route, and our database is going to be structured like that. And the next part we are going to have to handle is going to now be implementing we are going to start with the first implementation we are going to do is we are going to create, before we go into authentication itself. Okay, we shall start with authentication. The next part we're going to do is authentication for administrative layouts of our code, and casing we are going to use camel case, and that's what we're going to implement. We're going to implement authentication using beta auth. We're going to remove this because that causes an error whereby the types that are returned are not correctly returned, but they are the default types that are returned by beta auth. Let me leave it. I'll demonstrate to you why you shouldn't ever do this, why you shouldn't do this for now, as to my understanding. So I'm going to create the next video right away. See you in the next video as we continue on.